social self. Kind of interesting. This week on Thursday, I attended a seminar where the individual was talking about establishing his himself. He was a Jewish male, and he was talking about movies that he watched that allowed him to recognize his Jewishness, which was really kind of fascinating. I thought it was a little strange that the fact that his grandfather was a rabbi and only spoke Yiddish, didn't speak any English, and his father was a war hero from World War II. Uh, I found it kind of curious that he didn't really understand what it was like, what it meant to be Jewish, and of course he grew up in the in the 50s and 60s, and there were a lot of movies dealing with um, the theme of being Jewish. So I found it really kind of fascinating that he had such a difficult time understanding who he was. He's from New York City. Um, so let's go ahead and get started. The social self. There's a subtle connection between what is happening in the world around us and what's going on in our heads. Social surroundings tend to affect self awareness. Depending on who we are and where we are, each individual is aware of the differences between themselves and everyone else. Self interest colors social judgment. People tend not to be objective or dispassionate when they're dealing with a situation they're involved in. Self concern motivates social behavior. People do things for their own selves and often function to please or impress society at large. Self awareness is a state of focused attention on the self. Self awareness is associated with an activity in the anterior cingulate cortex, and that's the anterior cingulate cortex right there. Self-awareness develops in humans at about age 18 months of age. At about 18 months. So we until we're 18 months old, we think of ourselves as part of our parents, uh, not a single entity. But some animals, but not many, show self-awareness. Wolves and other pack animals don't seem to have self-awareness at all, and that may be one of the reasons why humans like dogs so much. Dogs are canines, of course, and canines are pack animals. And since they're pack animals, they are looking for uh, they're looking to be part of a group. They're looking to be part of a pack. And that's one of the reasons why dogs are so attentive, because they see you as part of their pack, and usually they see you as hopefully they see you as an alpha male or an alpha female, as the person in charge, as more in charge than they are, and that's one of the reasons why dogs are so beloved and cats aren't, because cats aren't that way at all. Besides personal attributes, the self concept contains memories, the basis for knowledge in oneself. Autobiographical memory, memory of information relating to oneself, demonstrates that the self plays a powerful role in the recall of events. The self is an especially powerful memory system because events and attributes stored in the self contain many associations. Events in autobiographical memory are stored at two levels: general events and broad lifetime periods. General events include events that have happened in your life, whereas lifetime periods refer to important times in your life, such as childhood and adolescence. So we see things in two different. This is one of the reasons why we dream some of the things that we dream. We're dreaming on two different levels. We're dreaming about a period in life, and we're dreaming about things that have happened in our lives. And sometimes the two get mixed. So we're adults we're dreaming about being adults in our childhood setting, or we're dreaming about being a child in an adult setting. These two things get all mixed up. And this is one of the reasons why we have these odd dreams that don't quite fit together. The self is concerned with maintaining positive self feelings, thoughts, and evaluations. One way to do this is by influencing memory. The self functions as a kind of unconscious monitor that enables people to avoid disquieting and distressing information. The self demands that we preserve what we have, especially that which makes us feel good about ourselves. Most people take 2 seconds to answer questions about their traits. This is because we have a summary knowledge of our self traits, especially the most obvious ones. This makes it harder to access memories that conflict with our positive self-concept because memories that match a person's self-concept are recalled easier. In research where the participants kept diaries of their own and significant others' life events, they were able to recall recent and older events more quickly than events in the middle of the research time period. Pleasant events were recalled better than unpleasant events, and extreme events better than neutral episodes. Pleasant episodes that fit the individual's self-concept were the most easily recalled. The self monitors experiences processing information in ways that makes the individual look good to themselves. Interactions and events are interpreted, organized, and remembered, recalling primary pleasant self-relevant events that fit the self-concept. And that's what we like the best. We remember things the best that agree with who we think we are or what we think we are, especially positive ones. Memories that an individual recalls tend to fit the mood they are in. Mood congruence recall is due to the greater likelihood that memory is able to find negative memories to fit the mood. Thus, negative moods lead to negative memories, which can induce a self-defeating cycle of sadness and depression. And this is one of the reasons that depression is so prevalent is because when we are depressed, that's what memories we can come up with. Don't come up with any positive memories. When a negative event occurs, an individual will often remember a positive event to make themselves. They will try to remember a positive event to make themselves feel better. This is known as incongruence effect. Thus, autobiographical memories may be recalled up to perform certain functions by regulating your mood, enhancing self-continuity, directing behavior, enhancing self-esteem. Now, when you're depressed, of course, we don't do this. You do not try to call up more pleasant memories to create an incongruence effect. And this is another reason why it's difficult for a depression to continue over an extended length of time, because the human brain doesn't want to feel and remember bad things. And for that reason, you can go into a funk, but the funk doesn't last for very long, because after you sleep and you wake up, your brain wants to feel good again. So it will remember happy things, or it will try to remember happy things. If you're really depressed, you have a difficult time calling up those happy events. But on a day-to-day basis, if negative things are taking place and we're in a negative mood, we try to call up things that make us feel good, and that's the incongruence effect, and that's how we regulate our mood. But some people in negative moods maintain the negative mood while others make themselves feel better. If a person adopts a focused, reflective attitude, admit that they failed, and explore how they can regulate the mood, they feel proactive and better. However, if they ruminate on their negative mood, they will focus on it neurotically and passively on the negative events and the feelings. And this is one of the ways that people go into a depression. And that's a scene from Better Off Dead. The movie Better Off Dead came out in the 80s. And there, that guy is says, "Buck up, little camper. He pats him on the back and knocks him off the bridge. And he lands in a garbage truck. Lucky him. Luckily, there's only garbage in there. Our brains not only maintain an individual self, but a collective self as well. The collective self is that part of our self-concept that comes from our membership in groups and reflects the evaluation of the self by important and specific groups to which we belong. And if you look at this map, we can see the different states and how they are categorized as far as being individualistic or being collectivistic. The whiter the states, the ones in the middle, Montana, Washington, Oregon, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, Nebraska, Colorado, Kansas, and Iowa are the most individualistic states. The states that are the least individualistic, that are the most collectivistic, are South Carolina and Louisiana, and then California, Utah, Mississippi, Georgia, Virginia, Maryland, I guess. And it goes down, it goes up and down from there. Whether the individual self or the collective self becomes dominant is dictated by a person's culture. In some cultures, the individual self is dominant. Collectivist cultures show a pattern of close links among the individuals who define themselves as interdependent and members of groups and families. And as you can see, the most independent places in the world, New Zealand, Australia, this is Switzerland, this little red dot right there, that's Holland, is very individualistic. England, the United States, and Canada. There were experiments involving threats to the collective and individual selves. Gertner et al. In 1999 discovered that threats to the individual self met with stronger emotions than threats to the collective self. This suggests that the individual self is primary, at least to people in the United States. A famous American proverb is, "The squeaky wheel gets the grease." This means that the more you make yourself known, stand out, or unique, complain, the more attention you will get. And the idea is to be unique in the United States. However, Japan is the very opposite. A very famous Japanese proverb is, "The nail that stands out gets pounded down." This means that if you are unique or stand out in any way, the culture will force you to conform. Be like everyone else. And there you go. Technology and social media have opened up a whole new dimension of the self. People seem to maintain an alternative self that exists in cyberspace. Studies show that the self individuals disclose on social media is not the same as they disclose in face-to-face situations. And this cartoon, this is what she is in real life. She's 5 feet tall. She has near black short hair, dark brown eyes, wears red glasses, pretty much a stick out. I don't know what stick out is. And this is what she looks like online. She has golden brown long hair. She's 5 feet 5 inches tall. She has pink eyes. She has a galaxy streak. That's this thing right here. I had to look this up because I didn't know what it was. A galaxy streak. I guess they dye their hair in different colors, and it looks like some of the pictures coming out of the Hubble telescope. Curvier, exaggerated body than in real life. This is her in real life. This is her online. Not only is the internet self different from the face-to-face self, but research has shown that women and men have different patterns of internet selves. Women are more likely to use carefully chosen pictures to present themselves, while men are more likely to use verbal descriptions. Managing sensitive identities, such as members of the LGBTQ community, is often a question of what and how much to disclose. Facebook is often the first foray into coming out for gay men. Gay men also use social media to explore the ambiguity that they might find in defining the complexity of their sexual orientation. Racial and ethnic minorities also deal with social media differently. Black clients tend to include more psychological and self descriptive statements than white or Asian clients. Black clients also used more words to describe their family than white or Asian clients, while white clients posted more pictures than black or Asian clients. A schema is an organized set of related cognitions about a person, event, or experience. A self schema is an arrangement of information, thoughts, and feelings about ourselves, including gender, race, age, occupation, social roles, physical attractiveness, intelligence, talents, etc. Self schemas may be different from different areas of life activities. Self schemas serve a very important function. They organize our self related experiences so that we can respond quickly and effectively in social situations. They help us interpret situations, guide our behavior, and help us understand new events. Self schemas lend order to experience. They guide what is encoded into memory and how it is stored. Memories that meet self schemas are easier to recall, and they influence thought and behavior in the future. One aspect of human life that has been ignored by many past and present cultures to the point of hiding it in history is sexuality. But people do have sexual self schemas. A sexual self schema refers to how we think about sexual aspects of the self. Sexual self schemas are derived from past sexual knowledge and experience, and they guide future sexual activity. Research by Suranowski and Anderson in 1998 found that women with positive sexual self schemas were more likely to have a previous sexual relationships, be in a current relationship, and display more passionate attachment to their partners. Women with a negative sexual self schema displayed avoidance of intimacy and passion and were more anxious about sexual activity. Now, this is really kind of interesting because we were supposed to watch two movies for this seminar, and one of the movies had a scene in it where a Dutch assassin is confronted. It's a woman, and she tries to seduce the members of the team of this assassination team. It's after Munich. Well, it's the movie Munich, actually. It's the movie Munich, and the Israeli government puts together an assassin squad to try to assassinate the people that were responsible for the Black September, who were responsible for the attack and the capture of the Israeli athletes during the 1972 Olympics. And it's really kind of an interesting movie because they just kind of stick these people together and tell them, well, you need to kill these, you need to kill certain people, you need to find them. We don't want to know how you do it. We just want you to do it. And so they get together, and one of them is killed by an assassin, and so they need to assassinate the assassin is what they're trying to do, and it turns out to be a Dutch assassin, a female Dutch assassin. So they go to her houseboat in Amsterdam, and they have to execute her. And it's really kind of interesting because at that part of the movie, she kind of tries to seduce them. She says, "Would you, I'm a perfect female," and she takes off her clothes, and so she's standing there kind of naked, and they start shooting her, of course. But they shoot her with low caliber bullets, and she doesn't really die right away. And it's kind of interesting because she's naked, and she's naked, and that's taboo in the Jewish culture, is dealing with this. And of course, the person that was talking about the movie was a bit offended by it, and it was really kind of interesting because how he reacted to. I mean, it was actually a revenge killing for killing their colleague. Um, and his reaction was the fact that, well, he's not supposed to see naked women, um, because that's part of his culture, and it really didn't. As far as the movie was concerned, it was necessary. It was a necessary part of the movie because it told another side of the story, and it's really kind of fascinating. So his sexual self and the sexual self that was represented in the movie did not quite mesh because of his own sexual taboos. While women's sexual schemas fit into categories, men's sexual self-schema flow along a continuum from schematic to aschematic. Schematic men display strong emotions of passion and love and see themselves as strong and aggressive with liberal sexual attitudes that result in casual sex but strong attachments. Aschematic men lead narrow sexual lives and have few, if any, sexual partners. And so they see the male as a continuum, but they see females as categories, as definite categories. I'm not that kind of girl. Men don't say I'm not that kind of boy. Well, they only do when they're uh, uh, making fun of the idea that females can either be that kind of girl or not that kind of girl. But men are not that way. Men are a continuum. Kind of interesting that they noticed that they identified that. Researchers have found that individual sexual self-schema are quite complex and can be affected by prior sexual history, current circumstances, and cultural imperatives that dictate sexual behavior. Researchers discovered that women in committed relationships focused on virginity less and sexual activity more, while women in less committed relationships reversed the focuses. Older women focus less on sexual activity and more on attractiveness. And this is really kind of curious. I'm skipping the part of they had a whole section in the text about individuals that had been sexually abused as children, and of course that was part of the whole sexual self schema, and I just kind of that part was really kind of confusing because that's not really what we're talking about. Research with the sexual self-schema of gay men showed a conflict between desire to avoid vulnerability coupled with a desire for an emotional connection with another person. Research shows that gay men may use casual sex as a way to experience the intimacy of a relationship without having to disclose intimate details about the self. Research by Elder et al. In 2015 found that the sexual self-schema of gay men evolved into the gay orientation. Initially, sexual exploration involved frequent casual sex that eventually transformed into a relationship as they begin to fully identify as gay. Eventually, they decide to become involved in a committed or open relationship. An individual's self-esteem is their overall self-evaluation and sense of self-worth. Self-esteem influences how we approach and respond to life challenges. Self-esteem is the evaluation of one's self-concept. Most people regard themselves more positively than they do their peers, the better than average effect. People with low self-esteem seem to be more adversely affected by negative life events than people with high self-esteem. Emotional intelligence is a person's ability to perceive, use, understand, and manage emotions and guides one's sense of self. Individuals who are emotionally intelligent tend to be more successful in personal and work relationships. The ability to monitor and regulate emotions allows them to think and behave appropriately. Individuals with high self-esteem take greater account of their emotions than people with lower self-esteem. Emotions are useful in a variety of areas, including understanding other people, creative thinking, and good health. When interacting with others, human beings have two primary self-related motives: to enhance self-esteem and to maintain self-consistency. And what do we mean by that? Enhancing self-esteem, of course, is making yourself feel better about yourself, and maintaining self-consistency is trying to be the same person all the time. Remember, and we're going to talk about all these selves that we have in just a moment, but we do. We have several different selves, and you can think of who you are when you're at the grocery store, and who you are around your family, who you are around your children, who you are at school. These all may be different selves, and you may project yourself differently in these different situations. And the self-consistency is what is one of the things that you're looking for in all your interactions. Sorry, I needed a drink. Self-enhancement and self-verification motives conflict with low self-esteem persons. It appears that the self-enhancement motive operates in response to a person's feelings, while self-verification operates in response to a person's thoughts. The two motives operate on different time courses. The affective route is quicker, but the cognitive route is more persistent. The two motives serve as checks and balances on each other. Only in cases of maladjustment does one motive strongly dominate the other. Studies suggest that self-enhancement motive is weaker in collectivist societies than in individualist societies, so this conflict may be an artifact of individualist culture. Resilient studies of survivors of the terror attacks on September 11th, 2001 showed that people who used self-enhancing strategies suffered less from the trauma. Self-enhancers showed fewer post-traumatic depressive symptoms than those who weren't self-enhancers. Self-enhancers tend to project very positive feelings and believe that they are in total control of themselves. There is a dark side to high self-esteem. People with high self-esteem may react with greater aggression than others when someone challenges their favorable self-assessments. The stability of high self-esteem seems to determine whether threats to self-esteem lead to aggression. Unstable self-esteem may come from conflicts between explicit and implicit self-esteem. High explicit self-esteem and low implicit self-esteem are together associated with narcissism. Yes, of course. In Greek mythology, Narcissus fell in love with his own reflection in a pool of water and was so fond of his own image that he couldn't leave and eventually died because he was so in love with his own reflection in the water. Today, narcissism refers to the combination of excessive self-love and a lack of empathy toward others. And of course, that was part of Narcissus's personality as well. And the reason that he stayed there and watched himself is because somebody fell in love with him. One of the goddesses fell in love with him, but he wouldn't pay attention to her. So she's the one that cursed him to look in the pool, and he fell in love with himself. The top red line shows, so this is, they've done studies on narcissism. This is a study from, a longitudinal study from 1980 to 2008. The top red line shows average scores for college students on the Narcissistic Personality Inventory, a common measure of narcissism from the years 1980 to 2008. And as you can see, it just kept going up. The bottom blue line shows the percentage of first-person pronouns, I, me, mine, in the lyrics of the 10 most popular songs of the year from 1980 to 2007. As you can see, there has been a steady increase in both measures over time, suggesting that narcissism may be increasing. And it continues to increase. Implicit self-esteem refers to a very efficient system of self-evaluation that is below our conscious awareness. This is according to Jordan et al. In 2005. Implicit self-esteem comes from parents who nurture their children but do not overprotect them, and it is unconscious and not controlled by the individual. Implicit self-esteem is automatic and less likely to be affected by day-to-day events. So implicit self-esteem is given to you by your parents. Explicit self-esteem arises primarily from interactions with people in our everyday life. The relationship between implicit and explicit self-esteem is unclear. The relationship is mediated by a number of factors such as gender, culture, and individualism. High implicit self-esteem is related to very positive health and social attributes, while explicit self-esteem seems to be more fragile or defensive, which accounts for the emotional reactions that threats to individuals with high explicit self-esteem evoke. Huygens in 1989 proposed that people think of themselves from two different standpoints, their own perspective and that of a significant other, such as a parent or a close friend. He also suggested that people have three selves that guide their behavior: the actual self, the person's current self-concept; the ideal self, the mental representation of what the person would like to be or what a significant other would like the person to be; and the ought self, the mental representation of what the person believes he or she should be. Huygens assumed that people are motivated to reach a state in which the actual self matches the ideal and the ought selves. The latter two selves thus serve as guides to behavior. In Huygens' self-discrepancy theory, when there is a discrepancy between the actual self and the self-guides, we are motivated to try to close the gap. We try to adjust our behavior to bring it into line with our self-guides. The process we use to make such adjustments is known as self-regulation, our attempt to match our behavior or our self-guides to the expectations of others, and it is a critical control mechanism. A form of self-regulation is self-control. Self-control operates within self-regulation processes and occurs when we consciously try to override a behavior that is dominant for us. Self-control is a specific form of self-regulation used when we consciously try to override a dominant behavior. Not only do individuals differ on the need to self-regulate, so do people who live in different cultures. Heine and Lehman in 1999 observed that whereas residents of the United States and Canada showed a strong bias toward adapting to others' expectations, Japanese citizens are less likely to try to self-regulate. They found that Japanese participants were much more self-critical than were North Americans and had greater discrepancies between their actual self and the ideal or ought selves, but that these differences were less distressing to the Japanese. It did not motivate them to change. When there is a good match between our actual self and our ideal self, we experience feelings of satisfaction and high self-esteem. When there is a good match between our actual self and our ought self, we experience feelings of security. Good matches may also allow people to focus their attention outside themselves on other people and activities. When the discrepancy gap can't be closed, we simply are not capable of behaving in accord with our expectations. In this case, we may have to adjust our expectations to match our behavior, and sometimes it seems to be in our best interests not to focus on the self at all. To do so may be too painful, or it may get in the way of what we're doing. Research has shown that when people are not particularly focused on themselves, self-discrepancies go unnoticed. When self-awareness is high, discrepancies become very noticeable. Having positive self-esteem does not mean that people have only positive self-evaluations. When normal people with positive self-esteem think of themselves, roughly 62% of their thoughts are positive and 38% are negative. The self has the capacity to engage in effortful behavior to deal with the external world. The part of the self that carries out this executive function probably does it in an automatic, unconscious fashion, dealing with the world in neutral gear. But when the self has no activity, does, but when the self has to actively control and guide behavior, much effort is required. No matter what statistics might say to the contrary, most people see their community, state, and region as similar to that described by Garrison Keillor of Lake Wobegon, where all the women are strong, all the men are good looking, and all the children are above average. Most people maintain a self-serving bias or the tendency to perceive themselves favorably. Such ideas allows individuals to interpret negative events as someone else's fault and positive events that may have happened through chance as due completely to their own positive attributes. Failures are externally caused, while successes are internally caused. In one study from Canada of young married couples, researchers discovered that males felt that they did more housework than their wives gave them credit for. However, at the same time, the wives took credit for more of the housework than they actually performed. Each group participated in self-serving bias, but unfortunately, this self-serving bias caused marital discord. Self-serving bias is evident in academia as well. When students do well on an exam, not only was it their hard work that allowed them to do well, but the test was a true measure of the material. When students do poorly, it is usually because of the instructor. However, instructors are just as bad. Successes are due to their ability to teach, and failure is due to a poor student, not the quality of the instruction. By making excuses for ourselves, it helps us to protect us from depression. While depressed people may make more accurate appraisals of themselves, the negative thinking tends to mire them deeper in depression. Is it better to be deluded or sad? Research shows that maintaining a high self-esteem, even when there is evidence to the contrary, reduces an individual's anxiety, even in the face of continuing threats. Most university sorority members perceive those in their sorority as far less likely to be conceited and snobby than those in other sororities. 2/3 of Americans feel that their child's public school is good, while seeing the nation's public schools as unable to teach. Most executives overpredict their firm's ability to produce. Such self-serving bias can lead an individual to gamble away their paycheck, having faith in their own good fortune. Such self-serving bias will permit an individual to open a doomed business without proper background capital. Such self-serving bias possibly took the United States into Vietnam, the Soviets into Afghanistan, and even the United States forces into Iraq and Afghanistan. Research confirms that people want to have accurate information about themselves, even if that information is negative. It helps them know which situations to avoid and which to seek out. There is evidence that people want others to evaluate their negative attributes a little more positively than they do themselves. People with high self-esteem take credit for success even when other people may have helped them. Interestingly, all people seem to have an egotistical bias. That is, they present themselves as responsible for success whether they are or are not. Some people are high self-monitors while others are low self-monitors. Some people will readily adjust their behavior to their circumstance and the individuals that they are around. Some social settings dictate that the individual adjusts their behavior to fit the social setting. One problem with people who are high self-monitors, they may espouse one idea in one circumstance and the opposite in another. High self-monitors are social chameleons. Self-monitoring is a tendency to use cues from other people's self-presentation in controlling our own self-presentations. High self-monitors are skilled impression managers, just like chameleons. High self-monitors are concerned with how things look to others. High self-monitors tend to choose romantic partners who are physically attractive. Low self-monitors are more concerned with meeting people with similar personality traits and interests. Sometimes people sabotage their chances for success by creating impediments that make success less likely. This self-handicapping serves to protect the individual from dealing with failure. The failure is due to their own handicap, not to their lack of ability. Just as people attribute their failures to failures on external causes, they themselves may choose to place the impediment as a form of self-protection. Examples of self-handicapping: reducing preparation for important individual athletic events, giving one's opponent an advantage, report feeling depressed, perform poorly at the beginning of a task in order not to create unreachable expectations, not try as hard as they could during a tough, ego-involving task. Alcohol and drug abuse may be an example of self-handicapping. Abusers may be motivated by a need to have an excuse for possible failure. They prefer that others blame substance abuse for their anticipated failure rather than lack of ability. Self-handicapping is thus another way people attempt to maintain control over the impression others have of them. People tend to process information and remember information related to themselves more readily than any other. This is known as self-reference effect. For most people, the most important thing to them is themselves. Research done where individuals were singled out by having them wear clothing that they weren't used to showed that they felt as if everyone was watching them, and this is known as the spotlight effect. Now, this just happened last week. This is Princess Poppy, and I think it's the Emmys. Yeah, it must be the Emmys. There it says Emmys. She she put on prosthetic. She was in wait a minute, drag race, and she was actually voted off Drag Race. But she's a drag queen, and so she decided that she would dress like this. All these other people that you see back here are members of Drag Race. They're also drag queens. And there's Princess Poppy. Showed them all up, dressed in green. Gilovich and colleagues in 1998 believe that we have the same preoccupation that others notice and pay attention to our external actions and appearance with respect to our hidden internal feelings. They called this the illusion of transparency, the belief that observers can read our private thoughts and feelings because they somehow leak out. It's the illusion of transparency. And that is the end of the lecture. So I'll talk to you again next week. To adjust everything.